So in this video, there's a few things to talk about with regards to Manchester. And what's going on with the furlough and that sort of stuff. Yeah, we'll get into it. And there's quite a few articles just to run through. So just be warned, there'll be a lot of clicking. Okay, and it might be a bit messy in places. But anyways, the highest tier of COVID restrictions are expected to be imposed on Greater Manchester after talks of financial collapse. So let me just make sure. So this article's from yesterday. So Andy Burnham said tighter measures would certainly increase levels of poverty, homelessness and hardship. And that's what Andy Burnham is basically fighting against, because he needs more money for Manchester. So the failure to agree a £65 million package of support will mean winter of hardship for Greater Manchester if Tier 3 measures are imposed, the region's mayor has said. And so what the government basically have given now, and that's something we'll get into in a minute, is £60 million. The bare minimum he wanted was £65 million for people. And he couldn't get that amount, and this doesn't bode well for people who live in other areas. Where I live in Northampton, we're in tier 1 at the moment, but our councillor Jonathan Nunn has said it's inevitable that we'll move into tier 2. And so what that means is a lot of places in tier 2, if they're not careful, if the testing isn't in place properly and the tracing, more important, isn't in place properly, then a lot of places could be moving to a tier 3. And then you've got to ask yourself, how much support are you guys going to be given? Especially because another thing Andy Burnham is fighting against is the 2/3 furlough. So what Andy Burnham wants is minimum 80% furlough, just like the rest of the country got in March. But the only thing that they're going to be getting is 2/3 of their wages in terms of furlough pay. And that only depends on if your business has closed due to COVID restrictions. If it's not closed because of that, if it's closed just because your business has slowed down due to COVID, then you won't get the furlough money as far as I know of. And so you've got to ask yourself, can you live off 2/3 of your salary, especially if you're on a low or minimum wage, especially in a city as expensive as Manchester? Could you do it? I don't think you could. Especially with statements that Boris Johnson has given about his £150,000 salary, and that's something we'll talk about in a few minutes. So government failure. Mr Burnham's comments follow 10 days of talks between the government and local leaders, including mayors and MPs, over moving Greater Manchester's 2.8 million population from Tier 2 to Tier 3. Starmer's said the collapse of the talks was a sign of government failure, and they could have given the £5 million as pocket change to the government, and that's something we'll talk about in a minute as well. We'll see if Laura Kay has said anything of interest. They originally wanted a £90 million amount from the government. They had to then they lowered it to £75 million and then to £65 million. So obviously they're negotiating on not necessarily a higher amount, but the fact is what Burnham is trying to avoid is as much hardship as possible, and that's something the government is inflicting on people, especially with their policy of going with a 2/3 furlough. 2/3 salary furlough, which is embarrassing, and that will put a lot of people in poverty. And if we go on to a list of MPs who have basically failed their constituents, we're talking about the Conservative MPs here. We've got Sir Graham Brady, who's been a constant thorn in the back of at least one Conservative Prime Minister, that's Theresa May. I can't remember if he did damage to Cameron, but if you look at some of these majorities here, 378, that's not a big majority. 105, if I was James Daly, I'd be very concerned. This person here, Chris Clarkson, also I'd be very concerned for next time out. And what Labour has to do is make the point that we have the money to do a proper furlough and give the minimum amount of £65 million. We have that money. We're choosing not to do this, whether that's for political reasons or because of the fact that the Conservatives don't care for poor people. Those are the two arguments that the Labour Party have to push now. They have to do this. And if we look here, the money, the government saying the money's not available. The UK government is currently paying management consultants around £7,000 per day to work on test and trace, a system that has failed. And that's a reason why we're seeing multiple lockdowns, because the test and trace system isn't working. And if you can't catch the people, if you can't inform them that they've tested positive really quickly, and if you can't tell people that they've come into contact with someone with COVID, they need to isolate within, I think it's 2 days is the bare minimum. If you can't do that, then the system is completely ineffective. And what we can see from this is these guys are getting paid bank. These guys are getting paid bank to do this, and they've failed. their job. And if we talk about one more article talking about the specifics of this, if we look at how much we've actually spent on track and trace, this article from George Monbiot, I think that's how you pronounce his second name, saying, if you're not incandescent with rage, you haven't grasped the scale of what has been done to us. The new surge in the coronavirus and the restrictions and lockdowns it has triggered are caused in large part by the catastrophic failure of the test and trace system. It's £12 billion, okay? Billion, not million, £12 billion budget has been blown. And if we weren't so wasteful here, you could have easily given 40-50 million extra to Manchester above the £60 million that's been given. Easily, you could have done that. And you could have used that money to fund other councils and other towns and other cities that need the money. But instead, we've wasted £12 billion on this. Billion. The budget is gone, right? So that means the government either puts more money and gives more money to these failed systems, or tries a whole new thing, or does nothing. And then we have the same problems continuing. If they go for the continuation of this, you're going to be burning more money, more than you could burn with a flamethrower in a bank. That's how much money we're burning here. More money than you could burn with a flamethrower in a vault full of cash. That's how much money they're burning here, and that's how quickly it's going. £7,000 a day for some of these consultants. Embarrassing. And so that's where a lot of the money is gone. And when the government says we don't have money for starving kids, when the government says we don't have money for Manchester, why did they have 12 billion to spend on track and trace, a system that's failed? Also, there's £3 billion missing that the government can't account for. Where is that money, and why hasn't that money been redistributed to people who need it? Because if the Manchester economy tanks, that's going to affect the taxpayer overall, because you're going to have less money through taxes, less money through VAT, and then you're going to have to give more support via welfare. So I'm not shocked to see this. I haven't got the clip ready, but at this point we'll cut to our resident expert on surprises.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
But yeah, I'm embarrassed that this has happened. I'm not shocked. I'm embarrassed. And so if we continue talking about some of this stuff here, Boris Johnson, this is when he was Foreign Secretary, says cabinet minister's salary of £140,000 is not enough to live on. Okay, so this is a man here who's complaining that he's making 100,000, over 100,000, right? He's complaining that money's not enough when he's forcing people to go on a 2/3 furlough because his track and trace system that cost over £12 billion has failed. Okay, that's in 2017. Okay, this is Boris Johnson in 2020, October of last month, right? This is when this article was written. Boris Johnson set to resign in spring because his £150,000 salary is too low. I don't believe that he's going to resign, but I do believe that he's saying that he's not making enough money. £150,000, okay, and he's asking for people on minimum wage to essentially take a third pay cut because of his failure to deal with the coronavirus. That's this guy here. If you voted Tory and you're in the north, you seriously need to think about what you have done and seriously need to think what you're going to do next time out. Okay, and we go to our final article. At least I think this is the last one. We've got one more after this one. Manchester lockdown furious. Boris Johnson provides just £22 million as support as city faces punishing winter. So I think once they realised they lost the PR battle on this one, that Andy Burnham was actually going to win out because he is in the right here, because he's fighting for his constituents, as any elected official should have to do. The bare minimum of their job is to fight for their constituents, right? They offered £22 million to Manchester because of the failed negotiations. Instead of giving five extra million, which they easily have pocket change, right, for the government, they offered him £22 million. That's £8 each for the city's 2.8 million residents. That's how much they were going to give to Manchester. And if you're in, especially the north of England, and you voted Conservative and you decimated the Red Wall, I know Corbyn was no prize horse, but this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. And so Greater Manchester, they have been given the £60 million support package. This come off today. We know that yesterday there was that 12 p.m. deadline that went, and that's why they offered the £22 million, and now they've had to backtrack on that and given £60 million. But we know that's not enough, and the bare minimum Burnham needed was £65 million. And so, I'm not surprised. We'll cut back to our resident expert on surprises.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
We'll cut back to him, but yeah, I'm embarrassed. And I know that if it happens to Northampton, I'm going to have serious emails with Michael Ellis. I'm going to ask him that, look, how do you expect people to live like this, especially when some of your boys take massive amounts on expenses and you get paid over £70,000? How do you expect people to live off 2/3 of the minimum wage? Because they don't get 2/3 off their rent, they don't get 2/3 off their mortgage, they don't get 2/3 off their grocery bills or of their house bills, electricity bills. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I've rambled on long enough. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you're in Manchester, if you're affected by this, which you most likely will be, especially if you've been furloughed, let me know. Let me know what you think. In the comments below. Email your local MP if you're in Manchester, Greater Manchester. If you're in one of these constituencies, especially if you're in a Conservative constituency, and ask them, how am I supposed to live off 2/3 of my salary? Ask them. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.